A quick disclaimer. This podcast contains harsh language and content that some viewers may find scary or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Dark Corners of Reddit podcast. Every week I will be narrating Let's Not Meet, paranormal, and other creepy stories from the horror forums of Reddit. I'm Bleak. This week's episode contains stories about a sinister detour, an overzealous prowler, and other tales of terror. So, without further ado, let's turn down the lights and go to our corner. Our first story is called He Drove Me to a Forest by Reddit user MysteryChick88. I have had the misfortune of coming across a few scary guys in my life. My friends will say I'm a weirdo magnet, so I'm pretty wary and clued up now that I'm a bit older. But when I was a teenager, I suppose you could say I was very naive. Back when I was 20, me and my family, my mom and little sister, had moved from a small rural village in the Shires to a town down south. It was a huge change. And as I had been having a difficult time, I welcomed the change of scenery. It was a beautiful town in an affluent part of the country, but I struggled to find a job and became very frustrated as my mom needed a bit of help with money. Over the course of about 3 months, we became fairly friendly with a middle-aged guy who owned a takeaway shop in town. I will call him Phil. If he ever saw us doing some shopping, he would come and chat and ask how the family was. He genuinely seemed like a decent, caring bloke. So when he said that he might have a job for me in his shop with a small flat upstairs I could rent for next to nothing, I thought, okay, great. Maybe things are looking up. Phil got our address and told me and Mom that he would pop by early evening time when he had finished and take me in his car and we could go see the flat. I get myself looking fairly casual, but presentable, and I'm feeling excited and confident, thinking, wow, a job and a flat? I've killed 2 birds with 1 stone here. I just need to show him I'm sophisticated and will make a great employee. Around 8 p.m., he knocks on the front door and Mom answers. He tells her, we will probably only be about a half hour away, and he'll have me back safe and sound in no time. Now, I didn't take my phone with me, as I had no credit to call out, and didn't think that I would be needing it for a quick trip up the road and back. In hindsight, a pretty stupid thing to do. Maybe if I had my phone on me, it would have deterred him from what he was about to do. So, it's already dark out as it's March. I get into his car and we start driving. He is chatting away, asking about how I am, and telling me what the flat is like. Within a matter of a few minutes, I've noticed that we are not taking the conventional route that takes us directly into town. At first, I think he's taking me down some sort of shortcut around the town, and just reason with myself that he knows the area well and I don't. 30 seconds in, I realize that he's taking me in the completely opposite direction. I can tell that we are both driving away from the populated town and into an area where trees swamp both sides of the road. My brain is now working overtime, thinking, where the fuck is this guy taking me? I just about managed to keep my composure, and I ask him outright, where are we going? Town's back the other way. I just thought I would take you on a little tour. It's beautiful here, many forests and peaceful places I would love to show you, he tells me, in his normal cheery tone. I'm not capable of saying anything at this moment because the logical and reasoning sides of my brain are in a full-blown war. I'm trying to keep calm thinking, okay, he seems fairly normal. Why wouldn't he just want to show me around? It's a stunning area, full of natural beauty. He's probably just proud to show me where he lives. But the logical side, however, disagrees, and a wave of panic comes over me. A little voice enters my head and shouts, what? In the dark? Shit, no! Are you stupid? So I just sit there in silence, taking in the scenery, which is becoming more sinister by the second, because at the moment, I don't know what to think. All I know is every cell in my body is screaming at me to find a way out of this situation. I start looking for signposts, houses, any distinctive landmarks, ditches, huge trees. Anything that I could use to recognize my way back if I had to bolt from his car. Phil can obviously sense I'm nervous, so is just talking away at me about what the job is like and how his staff is so friendly. Before I know it, he has slowed down to a crawl, and he has turned down a little mud rut road with a dense tree line on one side and pitch black open fields on the other. My stomach literally drops, and my body contemplates power vomiting all over his car because the reality of what is about to potentially happen hits me like a freight train. I'm thinking to myself, if I jump out here, I have to be able to run over muddy fields into literally nowhere. My imagination starts helpfully flashing images of him grabbing me before I get the chance to get out of the door. So I just sit there, buckled in the passenger seat, not saying a word. I'm just thinking to myself, if he attacks me, don't make a sound. Don't give him the satisfaction of showing him I'm scared. My brain is about as useful as a chocolate teapot, and I'm starting to get angry with myself for not doing something. But I was terrified. We come out at the top of this large dirt road, and there is a tiny little car park. It's surrounded by woodland with one car sitting in it. It's clear that there are people in there having sex, and he pulls up next to them. I realize he's brought me to a local dogging spot. He turns to me and puts his hand on my knee. He says, we should do what they are doing, with a deadly serious expression on his face. I make this bizarre, half-nervous laugh, half-garbled, high-pitched whine, and try to laugh off the suggestion to show him I'm not really into it and that I'm super uncomfortable right now. The alarmed expression on his face at my gurgled cackle, which sounds like I've just swallowed a potato whole, clearly freaks him out. I'm mentally congratulating myself for my socially awkward and grossly unsexy reaction. It will be fun. No one will see us, he persists. No, I don't want to. Plus, I'm kind of seeing someone right now. I lie. But he sits there just smiling at me like a Cheshire cat, like I'm going to miraculously change my mind at the sight of his weird face. Mom will be expecting me home now, I tell him after an insanely uncomfortable 30 seconds more of this, and I try my damnedest not to make eye contact. I'm sure she won't mind you being out a little bit longer with me. You can trust me, you know, he tells me with a straight face, as we sit next to the sex wagon. I sharply pull my leg away from his grip and tell him again. Mom is waiting for me, and she's going to start panicking if I'm not home in the next few minutes. So take me home. I look him straight in the face, and he knows that I'm not messing around. He replies with, okay, fine. I'll take you back now. Without another word, he drives me out of that creepy, seedy place and back home. My finger is hovering over the seatbelt button, ready to jump out. As we pull up outside my home, I breathe a sigh of relief as I can see my safety literally just a few feet away. Before he can stop me, I'm out, and I slam the door behind me. As I'm stepping over a tiny little rope fence around our garden, he gets out of his car, and my heart sinks. I think I'll pop in and see your mom real quick, he tells me. I swear I can see a smirk on his face, but I know he's only doing this because he's freaking out, knowing damn well that I'm going to go to her. He was trying to delay the inevitable or scare me into keeping my mouth shut. But before I can try to talk him out of it, Mom hears us and pulls open the front door. I barge past her with one thought on my mind. I head straight to the kitchen and grab a small knife out of the drawer. I then fly into my sister's room like a madwoman. Don't you fucking dare leave this room, no matter what you hear, I whisper to her. After seeing the knife I'm stuffing up my sleeve, she just looks at me with a panic in her eyes and whispers back, okay. I walk back into the living room, and the cheeky twat is just sat on the sofa, sprawled out, comfortable as fuck like he's at home. I see red, and I swear I feel like I'm the Hulk. I'm ready for the bastard. I awkwardly perch myself on the arm of the sofa Mom is sitting on, the absolute furthest away from him I can manage. He just sits there making small talk with Mom about how she finds the area and the neighbors. All the while, he is keeping his beady little weasel eyes on my every move. Why don't you come over here and sit next to me? He pats the sofa cushion next to him. No, I'm all right here, thanks, I tell him as I'm fidgeting with my sleeve, trying to stop the little knife from falling out in front of him. Why are you sat over there? Come here. Come on, honestly. I won't bite. He laughs and then just pats the seat next to him again. No, I am quite comfortable here. Thank you very much. This time through gritted teeth. My mom, bless her, is looking at each of us during this back and forth like a little tennis match, and I can see something is registering in her eyes. She can see my behavior is all off. I've got one butt cheek weirdly perched on the sofa arm, so I'm half stood up and half sat down, and I'm fiddling about with my sleeve. I'm twitchy as hell and staring at my mom in the face intensely, mentally trying to speak to her through the power of telepathy alone. I must have looked like a nutter. It's getting late now, so I think you should go, she finally speaks. Mom is starting to look anxious now that she twigs something bad is happening. Phil gets up, agrees, and mumbles about having to check on something at his shop. When he walks by me and is nearly out of the room, he pauses and turns to me to shake my hand, and I'm thinking to myself, what a fucking weird thing to do. I take the opportunity to kindly offer my hand that had the knife. Taking it with a bit more force than is polite, he soon yanks his grubby mitt out of mine when the tip of the blade jabs him. He looks down and sees the blade, then looks at me. I return a look of disgust. Phil hightails it out of our home without another word. A prick for a prick. I tell Mom everything, and she is fuming. We discuss going to the police, but there isn't really a crime committed on his part, aside from being a major creep. Sadly, when I mentioned to a couple of other girls my age who live down the street, they clammed up and shot each other a strange look. I guess he had probably done this type of thing before. The good news is, we moved away from the area after that. So glad to report I've never had to see his smug face ever again. So, Kebab Phil, let's not meet. Our next story is called Don't Follow Me by Reddit user Starving Slacker. This happened a few months back while I was still living in Georgia. I have recently moved to Vermont because of this issue, and I'm now ready to tell my little story. Once upon a time, I was at the library alone using Wi-Fi. My girlfriend was at home a few blocks down the road. I had already planned on messaging her when I was ready to be picked up. I didn't have a phone at the time, so I needed Facebook to help me out. Little did I know that the library closed early on Fridays. I guess in the grand scheme of things, I should have checked. Anyway, when the library is about to close, they cut the Wi-Fi off about 10 minutes prior. So when I sent the pickup message, it was declined basically. I didn't freak too much, because I figured she would get worried and come find me in a few minutes anyway. I decided to step outside and have a cig while I waited. That's where I fucked up. To my left was an old man, who I had seen in the small town here and there. A few times at the Rite Aid and dollar store. Most of the time I ignored him because he seemed a bit out of it. His face was always dirty around the mouth, and he never seemed to speak coherently. He'd just walk up to you and say something like, "Hey, have you tried my new book?" Something off the wall. Could have been old age, or he could have just been a little slow. Either way, he seemed harmless most of the time. So anyway, I spot him and nod my head, saying hi. He, of course, says something off the wall to me, and I just smile and pretend to know what he's talking about. He even hands me a pamphlet about Jesus. I just accept it and try to start walking home, and he follows me. I told him to stay there and wait for me in hopes that something would click in his mind and maybe cause him to stop. He didn't. So I turned back to go into the library. They were closed, but the door still let me in. I walked over and waved the old lady down. Mrs. Helen, I call her. I tell her that he's following me. This badass little old grandma lady marches right out of there and tells him he better find somewhere else to be. No fear. She explains to me that he might not know what he's doing. I agree with her and tell her that he just freaked me out is all. I'm a woman, and having a strange man follow you is off-putting. I just chalk it up to that and start walking away. I looked back to see if that man had followed. In some ways he had. He was on the other side of the parking lot, staring at me. At first I ignored it, but when I looked back he was still staring. And then he did the thing. 2 fingers. Gestured first at his eyes, and then at me. "I'm watching you." That's what that meant. Now tell me, did he really not know what he was doing? Was he just some weird old man with dementia? I don't know. A week goes by. I decide we need to get some junk from the store. So I walked that way, and as I crossed the tracks, I noticed something. It was that man. I was roughly a block from my house when I spotted him. And what did he do when he saw me? "I'm watching you." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I did my best to ignore him and just keep walking. I was almost sprinting by the time I got to the store. I worked there, so I knew everyone. I called out to Pam, my manager. I begged her to tell this man to get the fuck out of here when he walked in. He would be right behind me. Sure enough, there he was a few minutes later. She asked him if he needed anything. And he said, "Her. I need her. She needs to come to Jesus." Pam threw him out. Thank you, second mama. A few days went by, and my stupid ass thought, hey, why not go to work in the yard instead of sitting in the house freaking out about where Jesus guy? I headed outside after getting myself a beer and hooked my music up to our big speaker. I set things up on the porch, and then I looked out towards the road. I've never shot beer out of my nose, but guys, it fucking hurts. There was the old man, standing in the ditch watching me. You can't make this shit up. I called out for my girlfriend and she came out. When she saw him, she grabbed her phone and called the cops. They picked him up, and the drama subsided for about a month. I didn't see him anywhere. I thought it was over. Life was getting back to normal. But chickens, you've been counted. But you haven't hatched yet. This never ends well. Just when I thought I would never see him again, just when he had left my mind, just when the anxiety of him finding me was gone, he was back. I was at Rit Aid getting junk for the house when I saw him come in. I actually ducked. I fucking ducked behind the aisle end cap because I was a scared little girl with a problem, and I've never been so ashamed of myself. People were staring at me. Randy, the guy behind the counter, asked me if I was okay, and I told him that this guy had been following me and harassing me, and he wouldn't stop. And I knew if he saw me, he would just start up again. I crawled across the floor and made my way out of the doors before he spotted me. I ran all the way home like an idiot. I told my girlfriend what happened, and she offered to call the cops again. I told her not to because in the long run, he hadn't even done anything to me yet. I made it a point as I went around town to watch, take note of every corner, look all around me as I was headed to the store or the library or wherever. Every once in a while, I would see him and he would see me, and he would make that hand gesture. He was always watching me. I had also informed locals about my issues with him. Some of them told me not to worry so much. Others shared similar issues with him, like one girl, Madison, who I worked with. She told me how he would follow her around. He had been, up until he started following me. So he had moved on, it seems. While I was happy for her that she was free, I was terrified for myself. Now I know you guys are sitting here going, what the frick? Why did you skip states just to get away from this guy? Well, here's why. He broke into my house. He let himself in right after breaking a window. We were out and about when this happened. When we got home, I felt like something was off, but I just pushed it aside. The two of us were putting up groceries, and then we got started on dinner. By this time, I was a wreck. I just kept feeling like something was off. When I went to our bedroom, the shit hit the fan. Just the shit. All of it. Like, I shit and threw it at a box fan. There was that goddamn old man asleep in our bed. He'd already urinated on it. We called the cops, and he went away for a good while. We decided changing states was a good idea. I just never wanted to risk seeing him ever again. He went as far as to break in and sleep in our bed. Next time he finds me, I'm gonna kill him. I just know it. So we hopped, skipped, and jumped. It was time anyway. So, creepy Jesus dude. Hope you're still in jail or whatever. Let's never meet again. Our next story is titled House Dog Sitting Job Interrupted by Lurker by Reddit user It's My Birthday 1991. A few years ago, I had a dog sitting business with regular clients. One of those regular clients was a lady with a nice big house. There was a really long driveway leading up to the house, and it was tucked far back from the residential roads. It was somehow isolated while being in a dark residential neighborhood. No one could drive up to the house without being noticed. No one could park on the adjacent streets, and it would be very unusual for anyone to be walking up to the house or through the yard without having already parked in the driveway. The last time I house/dog sat there, everything began as usual. I fed the dogs, gave them their various meds, and played with them for a while watching movies. Best job ever! Eventually, I got sleepy and went to bed in the master bedroom, per orders. This room had huge, beautiful windows, with a view of the driveway, the only normal access point. I liked that about the room. After browsing on my phone in bed, I turned everything off and was just trying to go to sleep. As I was laying there, staring at the ceiling, deep in thought, I snapped to total awareness. Nothing changed. No one came up the driveway, and everything was silent. And yet, I suddenly started to feel very uneasy. The hair started to stand up on the back of my neck. A voice in the back of my head was urgently stating, "You're being watched. You're being watched. Someone is watching you." My heart rate started to pick up. I've never experienced anything like this and couldn't explain it in the least. I called my boyfriend immediately, grabbed my stuff, ran to my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the driveway. I glanced around the house while I was leaving and saw nothing and no one. When I got home, I checked every door to make sure it was locked and slept on the couch with a view of both entry points. The paranoia slowly dissipated, and I was eventually able to get to sleep. The next day, I returned in the morning and took care of the dogs. Loves, meds, potty, breakfast. And I started walking around the house towards the master bedroom. I started feeling really strange. Not a watched feeling this time, but a high alert sense that things were just off. I began to notice that candy wrappers were out that weren't there the night before. Doors were open that I specifically closed to keep the dogs corralled. Things were moved. I left again and called my boyfriend to stay with me. I couldn't be there alone. Someone was absolutely in the house the night prior. I wondered if maybe someone in the family stopped by, but I'm always given a heads up with lots of warning before someone comes over. It's not too uncommon for the owner's son to stop by, but he has my number and also gives me a heads up. I called the owner and told her what I noticed. She told me that she'd call around to see if anyone had dropped by. She called me back in just under an hour and assured me that no one did. "It must have been that old ghost," she said, with giggles. What a relief that she was taking my safety concerns so serious. I told her that I was having my boyfriend come over, just to be cautious. She didn't mind. A few hours later, me and my boyfriend got to the house. He checked the downstairs. Absolutely never am I to go upstairs, and everything was fine. We were hanging out for hours, playing with the dogs and watching movies. I left my boyfriend in the living room, walked past the front door, and went to the bathroom around 10 p.m. As I was about to walk out of the bathroom, the dog started barking. As I was walking back, I saw my boyfriend stand in the entryway by the living room. He was focused on the front door and tense like I'd never seen him before. Again, the hair on the back of my neck began to stand up. He quickly ducked to the side of the front door window. But before I could finish asking him what was going on, he told me, "Shh, someone's out there." He approached the door and looked out, but the person was gone. I rushed over to him, and he explained to me that he was sitting on the floor in the living room when the dogs just started barking at the front door. My boyfriend went over towards the door and saw a black figure peeping into the window, and then he walked off. When I looked out, no one was there anymore. I was absolutely terrified, so I texted the son just to make sure again that it wasn't him. Short aside, a few weeks prior, he asked me to go to a wedding with him, and I gently replied, my boyfriend, who the son knew about, wouldn't think that it was very appropriate. So when I asked him if he had stopped by the house, he replied, My girlfriend doesn't think it's appropriate that you're texting me so late. I apologized to him and told him that I had a safety concern and that it was important. I told him what my boyfriend saw. He simply responded that he didn't stop by. At that point, we were done for the night. We put the dogs in their kennels, waited a little bit, and ran to my car. The next day, I very quickly took care of the dogs in the morning and left before the owners got back. I've never felt such a deep electric sense of imminent danger like I did that night in bed. That was just too much. When the owner asked me back a few months later, though I desperately needed the money, broke student, I politely declined. Our final story this evening is called To My Troubled Tinder Date, Let's Not Meet Again, by Reddit user Alex Stunning. I met a guy on Tinder, and we really started to hit it off. We'd been chatting for a few weeks, and even discovered that we had a few mutual friends. I was pretty intoxicated one night, was feeling social, and decided to call an Uber to his place. Once I got there, we talked outside for a while, and ended up vibing even better in person. I opened up to him a lot about my health problems, and he opened up to me about his older sister who had passed away from a similar condition to mine. I was curious about his sister, but definitely didn't want to pry. We walked into his house, and it smelled like 1,000 dead rats were rotting under the floorboard. I was still pretty drunk, so I tried to forgive it because, hey, sometimes animals die under a house or in the walls, and there's nothing you can really do about it. I started to look around, and the whole place looked like a cluttered storage unit. He took me to his room, which was seemingly normal, kind of feminine, but that's cool, and we hook up. I ended up falling asleep there, and woke up around 10 a.m. to the stench of death. I opened my eyes, feeling very sober, and started to look around the room. I noticed that only girls' clothes were hung up in his closet. I started to assume I've possibly been cheated with. Then I see a giant black binder on his nightstand. When he woke up, I decided to jokingly ask him, "What's in that giant binder?" Turns out it was every single episode of Golden Girls printed out. He said he read it at work, and it was the only show he'll ever watch. Okay. I asked him what he did for work, something I definitely should have known by this point, and he dodged the question. I sat up and looked at the pillow that I'd been cozily sleeping on. It had no pillowcase, and was covered in what looked like to be old blood. It looked like the blood had been coughed onto it. I started putting the unpleasant pieces together. I asked as sensitively as I could, "Hey, was this your sister's room? I noticed the clothes in the closet." He said, "Yeah, and this is her bed. I haven't changed or washed anything. It just makes me feel better to be in her bed. This is actually where I held her when she died, and you remind me so much of her. I really, really like you." And then he casually tried to hook up with me, like he didn't just drop unsettling as fuck news. I felt immensely sorry for him, but needed to get out of there. I made some excuse and left. I decided to not entirely ghost him because of how bad I felt for him. He was clearly dealing with some really dark shit. We kept in contact for a few weeks, until I went on my Find My Friends app and noticed that he had clearly taken my phone while I was asleep that night and shared my location with himself. I called him and went off. This was not my first rodeo with a stalker type, and I was not dealing with it. He told me he couldn't believe I thought he would do that, and I'm being a really terrible person dumping him because his cat had recently died. I blocked him. After he said that about his cat, combined with his tendency to hold on to things, it really made me wonder what that smell actually was. Let's hope not, and though I hope he gets help, let's not meet again. Thank you so much for listening to the second episode of the Dark Corners of Reddit podcast. The podcast has really begun to take off, and I'm thankful for the amount of support I receive from my friends, family, and colleagues. I never thought this tiny idea in my head would become a reality. What was once just a hobby of mine has really turned into something special. So for me, your host, thank you all so much for your kind words and encouragement during the launch of my podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can show your support by giving it a good rating on Stitcher or on your go-to podcast directory. Visit me at darkcornersofreddit.com. If you have any tips, suggestions, or just want to shoot the shit, you can email me at my new domain, bleak@darkcornersofreddit.com, Facebook at facebook.com/darkreddit, and Twitter at darkreddit. Music from today's episode came from purpleplanet.com, a great source of free media for podcasts, YouTube videos, and blogs. You can find a credit link in the description. The Redditors that graciously allowed me to narrate their stories will be formally listed in the description as well. New episodes of the Dark Corners of Reddit will be released every Thursday. I'll see you next week in the corner. Until then, sleep safe.